Hi, and welcome to Order Up with Chef Eric. I'm Jessica Vosel with the Herald Standard, and this is Chef Eric Durst of the Firehouse Restaurant in Connellsville. And every month, Chef Eric takes us through one of his favorite dishes and shows us how to save money and eat better by eating at home rather than hitting up the drive-thru. And today we're talking pasta, and not the box stuff. We're talking fresh, homemade, from-scratch pasta that he's going to show us how to make at home. And if I've learned anything from Chef Eric, it's that even the dishes that seem really complicated are actually not that difficult once you dive in. So I'm really looking forward to learning how to make my own pasta. How do we get started here, Chef?
Well, a few months ago I did do an article on making your own pasta at home, and a lot of feedback that I got from some people was they were curious if it was actually that easy to do. Because the article explained that it was very easy. So I wanted to go ahead and show them just exactly how easy it was. So basically the first way to start is to mix up your dough. I made up a batch earlier that we have resting. It's always important to let your dough rest. It becomes more pliable, not as tough. And also too, a long time ago, before mixers, they always mixed dough by hand. I've found out that mixing the dough by hand tends not to make it as tough. But if you're mixing 50 pounds, it's also a lot of dough to mix by hand.
Right.
So small batches, it comes out a lot less tough, a lot more pliable. You don't work it as much. So definitely mixing it by hand is better for small batches. But again, if you're doing 50 pounds, we tend to use a mixer. As far as this batch of pasta go, I'm using, what we use here at the restaurant is we use both durum flour and semolina. Semolina is a little bit coarser. It's almost like a cornmeal, but a little bit not quite as coarse. So we do like a 50-50 mix. You can use, say, if you're making it at home, you have Robin Hood or all-purpose flour or something like that. You can use it, but that's more typical of like an egg noodle that you would do in like a stroganoff or a casserole or something like that. The nice thing about the durum and the semolina is it already does have that nice yellow tint to it. So when you do add the eggs to it, it comes out a nice yellow color like in a typical imported Italian pasta. Whereas the all-purpose flour is going to come out a little bit whiter, a little bit brighter. However, to counter that, if you are looking for that deep yellow look, you could just do egg yolks as opposed to a whole egg.
Now what if you're being health conscious and you want to do like a whole wheat pasta?
You can do whole wheat. I just kind of, the more coarse ground, or I should say the more ground, the softer it is, tend to work out a little bit better. Some of the coarser ground wheat flours that you buy in bags, say even like a multigrain or something like that, they can tend to make the pasta a little bit brittle. So when you're cooking it, it'll tend to break up because there are big chunks of the grain in there. So definitely the finer the flour, the better your pasta will stay together. But yeah, you can use wheat, whatever type you want to do, as long as the eggs will keep it together.
Alrighty.
So again, just a pound of durum, pound of semolina. Took roughly about a dozen to 14 eggs. I kind of eyeball it. I'm looking for the right consistency. You don't want it too wet, but you don't want it too dry either. So this is basically a dough. I had it wrapped up. Cover it after you get it mixed. Let it rest 20-25 minutes. It'll make it a lot easier to work with. We'll just start out here. So just some basic cuts, we just take a little piece off. Now you can use just regular flour on your cutting board, your pasta board, to soften it up. It's a lot less expensive than say the durum and the semolina, and it's really not going to affect your dough that much.
Does the job.
So this is pretty much a standard pasta maker, pasta roller. A lot of them are made in Italy, so they're imported. You can find them at most home stores, Bon-Ton Home Store. You can get them online, Amazon, all that place has them. Price range, depending on the quality, anywhere between $100 and $200. Most of them are very durable though, so they'll last forever. Different types of wheels as well, but you have the standard roller, which is just for rolling out sheets, and then you have cutters. On this particular machine, we have both a spaghetti cutter and a fettuccine cutter, but there are different kinds that say have a pappardelle wheel on it, which is like a wide fettuccine noodle, or they have a smaller spaghetti, which you would cut angel hair and stuff like that. So there are different types of cutters. So the highest setting on this one is an 8. 8 typically would be, the widest part. That's a good way to get it started. Sometimes if you try to start it too skinny, It'll create a lot of air pockets. It won't roll through correctly. Sometimes it'll split like that.
Yeah.
But you just keep
fix it.
working it right. I just run it through a few times till I get the desired thickness. And then once you get a decent strip, you can shrink it down a little bit. Again, depending on the thickness you want. The thinner you roll it out, say if you're making a ravioli or something like that, you want to try to get it, a little bit on the thinner side. But say if you like your fettuccine a little thicker, you could leave it a little thicker. Now, a couple different things when I talked before about wetness and dryness. If I'm doing, just say cutting pasta, I want it to be a little drier. That way it'll keep it from sticking once you form them into your nests. You can put them in the freezer. You can cook them just fresh. You can flash freeze them, put them on a sheet pan, throw them in your freezer, wait till they freeze, and then bag them up and just leave them frozen and cook them as you need it. If you want to do a big batch, say once a month or whatever. After I get that floured up, we'll start out with a little bit of fettuccine.
Oh, that's nice. It reminds me of the Play-Doh. I played with as a kid. That same sort of idea.
Right.
That's nice.
Yeah, just
Twist
a nice
it up.
nest. That's probably about a 6-7 ounce portion there, so that would be good for a good dinner portion, for somebody.
Yeah. And there are other tools that you can use that are a little bit more simple, not quite as expensive.
Sure. Before,
a
a lot of this stuff came out, as I was pointing out earlier, this is like what they call a pastry cutting wheel or cake wheel. It's usually used to mark, say, cakes or score doughs or something like that. Back in the day, they literally just cut them by knife in the fettuccine noodles. Cutting angel hair, cutting spaghetti, that could be a little tough, but they do have different sizes of these. These are great, like I said. A couple different sheets. Again, something like that.
Okay.
Something like that. And then you have a fettuccine noodle.
Yeah.
So like I said,
not
back
quite
in the
as
day,
uniform as the other one, but
But it does work.
And you can get that at the kitchen store or whatever also. Okay.
Right, sure.
All right.
And like I said too, sometimes they even
Just use your knife, yeah.
Yep, and it'll pull off the same. Definitely the machine simplifies it, especially if you're going to do it on a regular basis. I highly recommend,
investing,
Right.
yeah. You probably recoup some of the money by making your own pasta, so
Sure,
you're not buying
absolutely.
the pre-made stuff.
And that's another thing too, if the cut gets messed up or something, boom, just put it back together,
Right.
rework it.
Right.
It's the nice thing about dough, very durable.
Yeah, that's definitely something I've learned doing these shows is that a lot of things can be fixed.
Right.
Even if you mess up, it's not permanent.
So that's about a 4 roll there. A little, kind of perfect for spaghetti, a little bit thicker than, say, I would want for something, say, like ravioli. Again, too, nice spaghetti nest. Right in the really nice thing about fresh pasta is cooking time. Boom, in the water, 2-3 minutes, it's done.
Right.
Right
Yeah.
from the cutter. Again, too, if you're doing it, say, in the morning, your dinner guests aren't going to come over till later that night, pop them in the freezer. You could even keep them in the cooler for a few hours, just cover them so the moisture from the refrigeration doesn't get to them. It'll make them kind of
Okay.
stick. Too, if you're going to roll nest, too, I always give them a little bit of flour, just in case your dough is on the wet side. It'll keep it from sticking as well. So one thing I am very fond of is lasagna sheets. I'm not a big fan of dried or store-bought. I know a lot of them nowadays, you just put them in dry,
Right.
cook them. They are, somewhat par cooked. But I really don't like how they come out because even though you're putting them in dry, they still are cooking for, depending on how heavy or how stuffed you have your lasagna, you can cook from anywhere from a half hour to an hour and 20 minutes, depending on what temperature. So that can tend to beat up the pasta a little bit.
Yeah.
So the one thing I found about doing, homemade lasagna sheets is it's usually the same texture throughout. No matter how long it cooks, it still comes out, pretty firm. It doesn't get real mushy on you. But as far as lasagna sheets go, you would just do, say a normal sheet that you would do for spaghetti. You would take, say, a pan. I'd put a little bit of sauce down. Lay my lasagna sheets in. A little bit more sauce, cheese, maybe some pepperoni and meat, and just layer it. Boom, ready to go. Don't have to cook it right in there. The sauce will take care of everything.
Excellent.
We do have to make up a little bit of ricotta cheese mix.
Okay.
Now, my ricotta cheese mix, I use basically the same recipe no matter what I'm making. Whether it's raviolis, whether it's cavatelli, manicotti, tortellini, whatever it may be, I always use the same recipe.
Okay.
It's used typically I believe this is 3 pounds. Yeah, this is just under 3 pounds. 2 pounds, 14-ounce batch. I do, let's do this first. I do 1 egg per pound. Just a little bit of Parmesan cheese, probably about a cup per 3 pounds. A little bit of salt and pepper. And then I just mix this up. The eggs will make this cheese kind of set up once it's cooking, so it's kind of not running everywhere on you when you cut it. Or
Okay.
like first, we'll roll up a few manicottis. It'll keep the cheese in there when you're baking the manicotti. Now I don't want to over flour these ones too much. I want to kind of keep a wet side. There's 2 ways to do it. Back to opposed, like when I was talking about dry and wet pasta. Anything I'm sealing, whether it be ravioli, tortellini, I always like to brush the ends on it with an egg wash. It's
Okay.
a little bit extra security as far as when it comes to the edges sealing. I just feel better about it, less breakage, less weight, all those things.
Yeah.
But if the dough is wet enough, it will stick on its own.
Okay.
So you have a couple different options you can work with there.
Okay.
Just a little bit of cheese in there.
And just roll it.
Just roll it up. Yep, you got it. And again, I would put a little bit of sauce down there.
And then bake it as you would a lasagna,
correct.
obviously. Yeah.
And I really don't overstuff mine because as it cooks and it kind of firms up, it will tend to, the cheese will expand a little bit from the egg, as well as the pasta, when it expands from cooking, absorbing the water, it'll force the cheese kind of to the edges as well.
Oh, okay.
So I really
That's a
don't
good
want to overstuff them, or else it'll just roll out.
Yeah, my instinct would be to put a ton
Right,
of cheese
right.
in there, just make it really cheesy and good, but that makes sense.
And then boom,
you
simple
go.
manicotti. If you wanted to do a cannelloni, which is basically the same thing, it would just be a meat filling, ground meat. If you wanted to put some pepperoni or some sausage in it, same type of thing.
Same thing, yeah. So if you're going to do this, how much time should you allot for? I guess it depends on how much you're making.
Again,
But does
I
it
mean,
take a whole afternoon?
No, I
No?
mean, depending. I mean, if you're making one thing, I mean, look, we've already did 2 or 3. We did 2
That's true.
pastas, a
Yeah.
manicotti, in a few minutes. The dough, very simple once you get it made up. But I probably let it rest longer than I do actually making it. I spend more time letting it rest than it takes to
Then
make it,
to
right?
actually do the work, yeah.
Okay, so this would be another sheet here. We're just going to try to cut some uniform squares.
Is this for ravioli?
We're going to actually do a tortellini
Oh,
first.
tortellini, okay.
Here's a couple squares. And I kind of do try to make mine a nice square.
Mm-hmm.
It can get a little funny on you if you start working with rectangles and stuff like that.
Yeah.
So I'd say maybe like a 3x3 square. Now, and I also have seen different ways of folding tortellini. They're both very similar, just depends on where they grew up in Italy or who taught them how
Okay.
to do it or anything like that. But it's kind of similar to egg rolls to start out anyway.
Mm-hmm.
You just give it a quick fold. Again, too, we'll just
Triangle.
pinch this one. The dough's a little wet, so I'm not going to put an egg wash
But
on
if it was dry, you would do the
Right,
egg
I
to
would do
seal
the
it
egg
up,
wash,
yeah.
Right.
Like when you do wontons.
Right, correct.
Yeah.
And then you want to give it one more fold.
Okay.
Put a finger here. Wrap each one.
Ah, okay.
Tuck this one under.
How pretty.
Give that a fold back. That's
There
tortellini.
you go. Can I give that a shot?
Sure.
Here, give me a little direction again. So fold it into a
Yep, you wanna
triangle.
fold it into a triangle.
Okay.
Go ahead and crimp
pinch
the
it.
edges. Yep. Also, too, one thing you just want to be careful of, I try to eliminate as much air in with the cheese as
Okay.
possible.
All right.
It'll help in the long run in cooking. If you get a lot of air into it, they tend to float to the top before they're done. And if you keep all the air out of it, a good indication to know when they're done is when they float. But if you
Oh,
have
right.
a lot of air in it, it'll throw
Then it won't work.
that off, right?
And then you pull this up, right?
Yep, fold it one more time.
Okay.
Put a finger in the center.
Finger in the middle.
Wrap
Bring 'em
those
over.
around. Yep.
It's not gonna be as pretty as yours, but
Go ahead
that's
and give
okay.
it a pinch, and
Pinch
you can
here?
even and you can even give it a fold under. And I give it a little round.
Okay, and then
There you go.
pinch the top.
Mhm.
All right. Yeah, much uglier than yours, but hey.
Okay. And then the other tortellini, like I said, I've seen is the same type of fold. Get that air out of there. And then they actually don't give it the second fold.
Okay.
They just spin it, crimp it off, and fold the top
And fold
back.
that under.
Yeah.
Okay.
So those are the two different folds I've seen. Both very similar, just two different ways. I actually like the one with the fold. I feel it secures up the cheese in there a little bit more. It's not as
Okay.
loose as, say, to not folding it.
Right.
So that's the big difference I found with those two. One thing I do tend to do too is, depending on how much you're making, how long it's going to take you. Naturally, if you're just starting out, it's going to take you a little bit longer. I always tend to keep a damp towel on top of the dough. It'll keep it
Okay.
from drying out a little bit on you.
Okay.
You could do, we do anything from sausage raviolis to lobster, crab. We've done vegetable raviolis, would say asparagus or spinach.
That sounds good. And seafood too. That sounds lovely.
So with anything, with the raviolis, naturally there's more ways to do it than one. So I just take a nice sheet. You could do another sheet exactly like this. Put a little scoop in each one, lay the other sheet on top, take your ravioli wheel,
okay.
cut them, they're done. Me personally, I like doing one row, folding them, and cutting them. It's a little bit easier, a little bit faster.
Okay. So you don't use a second layer at all. You just fold it.
Right. So I just do
Right.
a couple down the middle.
I've seen them deep fried also.
Right.
It's an option, I
So I
guess.
just give them a fold.
In between the.
Right. I go ahead and I pinch them down a little bit in between. And then ravioli wheel, you can buy it basically anywhere.
Gives that little detail there.
And I run this directly down the center where I was pinching it.
Oh, very pretty.
And then two, you can always go back. I just give them a little extra pinch. So
Okay.
you would, they don't take quite as long as, say, like a raw pasta, but again, too, nothing like fresh.
Yeah.
Cook those off for a couple minutes. And then the last thing I wanted to show was cavatelli. Cavatelli is basically a gnocchi, except it's made with ricotta cheese as opposed to potato. Those are the
Okay.
two variances in the two. Very simple dough recipe. I take my standard, filling, whatever I may be using it for. It's roughly about 50-50 cheese to flour.
Okay. And this is the flour semolina mixture from earlier? or is this
Actually, that's
flour?
just, I've come to find out that the cavatelli come out very soft using, specifically, I use Robin Hood.
Okay.
You could use any all-purpose flour, but even at the restaurant, we go ahead and we use the all-purpose as
Regular.
opposed to the semolina and that, just
Okay.
because it makes them come out that much better.
Okay.
But basically, just gonna work in the dough into this cheese. It's gonna get a little
Nice and
messy.
messy,
This
yeah.
is one thing at the restaurant we mix by hand. The cavatelli here, never see a mixer because it will make it tough. So this
Okay.
is one we do by hand. We do roughly a 10 to 12 pound batch at a time.
Okay.
So yeah, we definitely do this all by hand.
Is that a special or is it something that's on the menu?
The
all the time?
cavatelli is on the menu. Yep, the raviolis
get
are on
to
the
try.
menu. All the pasta here is homemade. We do have the gnocchi we make homemade as well with the potato. Give me just a little bit of that flour on here.
Just sort of sprinkle it on there.
Yep. Just kind of want to work it until it gets, it stops sticking to your fingers. It'll
Yeah.
start pulling away. So when you do get it right about there, it'll feel like a nice little, just soft piece, almost as soft as, say, a bread dough.
Okay.
Very, very soft and easy to work with. So when the raviolis are done, just pop them out of the water.
No casualties, it looks like.
Nope. Sealed up pretty good.
You know what you're doing there.
This is how they would come out here. Nice, very fine, very delicate dough. Cheese all held up very nice, very homemade looking.
Yeah, you can tell. All right.
Good scoop of our homemade tomato sauce.
Just a regular tomato.
Yep, this is our house
meatballs.
sauce we make here. Sauce is both homemade as well as the
delicious.
meatballs. A little wipe there. Nice dish of homemade raviolis. A little Parmesan on top.
Oh, yeah.
Ready to go. This was some spaghetti we made earlier. We'll drop this down as well. So we go down there in the water as well. Again, 2-3 minutes, ready to go. There's that batch of fettuccine we made earlier.
It's my favorite.
Drop that in the basket. Grab our tortellini. Let them go as well.
Let's see if mine holds up. I don't know.
Okay. All right, so back to the cavatelli. Again, very soft dough. You feel this dough and feel that dough.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, very,
This is
very,
much-
very, very delicate
This
dough
is
here.
much more Play-Doh-like, and this is more soft and
Right.
fluffy. Yeah.
So basically, again, hand rolled. Machine won't be used at any cavatelli. What we do is we basically just roll it out. Size depends, really up to you. If you like them bigger, make them a little bit bigger. Really the only thing about size is cooking time. The bigger they are, the longer they're going to take to cook.
Okay.
But again, too, the dough is, the ricotta cheese is done. The flour's a little raw still. So again, 4 or 5 minutes and they're ready to go.
Do they expand also?
Yes,
once
they
you
will
put
blow
them
up a
in
little
there?
bit.
Okay.
Now this is basically just what we call a pillow cut. This is a standard, but
Nice.
the reason that a cavatelli or a gnocchi are rolled is to catch that little bit of sauce in a little pocket. So every one you bite into, it does have some sauce
okay.
holding in it as opposed to just rolling off.
Right.
So basically just a general technique, finger, pull, and roll. Just finger, pull, and roll.
How
This
do you-
forms that little
I don't know how
pocket
you
in
did
there.
that. It just
put a little pressure on it
in the
and pull
center,
it.
and
Yep.
then pull down, and then
Yeah.
and then just roll it back over.
Yep.
Just make that little pocket. Okay.
Just enough to keep some tension on it, but you
Yeah.
don't want it to, not so hard that it's sticking into the board, but just a little
Oh, I
tension.
see. Okay.
Roll it, and they roll.
And there you go.
They form those little pockets, and that's what holds the sauce.
Oh, nice.
So this was roughly, say, a half pound of dough. When we do batches here of 12 pounds, it's literally probably 6 full sheet trays of
Oh, wow.
rolling these. So it's very
Wow.
time consuming.
I bet.
Very time consuming. Again, just pinch and roll. If you want to finish them up,
Sure.
I'll pull these other pastas.
I imagine after a couple hundred of these, it's
Yes, it's
Whoops.
not one of my most favorite things to do,
Yeah.
but everybody seems to really like them.
Yeah,
so.
they look delicious. All right.
So again, I pulled out just a couple quick ones. I tossed the homemade spaghetti. Again, I tossed my pasta with a little bit of sauce, keeps it from sticking, going to the table. so take some of that excess water off too.
Okay.
One thing I hate is going to a restaurant and ordering pasta and seeing water floating underneath my
Right.
sauce on the plate.
Right,
Absolutely
exactly.
drives me crazy.
Yeah.
The way to get rid of that is when you drain your pasta, so it has a little bit of moisture on it, I put it into the sauce, let it simmer for 30 seconds on the stove in the sauce, and it'll absorb. It'll
yeah.
either absorb or boil off that water.
a
So
great
that's a
idea.
good thing.
Yeah.
Fettuccine Alfredo, heavy cream, little bit of Parmesan cheese, salt and pepper, homemade fettuccine.
Delicious.
Very simple. Sorry,
Oops, sorry about that.
just a little bit extra on there. Parmesan cheese on all of them. There are companies out there making homemade pasta, but you will find it's mostly flash frozen. They do freeze
Okay.
it and they box it up and they'll ship it.
Right.
But there are things available like that.
All right. Well, I can't wait for my favorite part, which is the tasting of what we've done here. So, and we're covered in flour, which means it was a good day.
Right.
Thank you so much, Chef Eric. This was really a cool experience. So, and we'll see everybody next time. And
Thanks.
order up with Chef Eric.
Thanks.
Thanks.